Good to go, Morgan?
Good to go.
Okay, greetings, everyone. I'm Stacy Heilman. I'm Associate Vice Chair for Research in Department of Pediatrics at Emory University and Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. And I will be emceeing today's event that is our Global Lectures Uniting Everyone, which is today's name of today's event, is in honor of our dear friend Oliver Brand, pictured here, who passed away, unfortunately, and we have a fellowship in his name, and if you care to donate to that, you can scan this QR code. But as I said, he was a really important part of our ACME POCT family, that it's the sponsor of Global Lectures Uniting Everyone. And so today's feature is going to be all about highlights of a new call for applications that we have, including what can the ACME POCT do for you? Well, you might first ask, what is the ACME POCT? Well, I'm here to tell you that our goal is to assist and enable inventors who have developed microsystems-based point-of-care technologies. This can be for a range of applications, but basically we are looking to define a clinical need, conduct the clinical validation, refine the technology, and with the end goal of accelerating the path to translation and ultimate clinical adoption. We have a number of partners at Emory University, Georgia Tech, and Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, many of whom you'll get to meet today when we describe this call for applications to you. Our overall structure and activities of the ACME POCT is reflected on this slide. Today, in the yellow, the technology core, and the green, the clinical core, are two of the main areas we'll be describing, and we'll also be telling you about a couple of other areas of expertise and services that will be important to you as you think about putting together a letter of intent. So speaking of the letter of intent, these are excerpts from our request for applications, their call for proposal, and it's all centered around if you have a promising point of care medical technology that's in need of further development. If you do, you've come to the right place. The people who should apply have a microsystems-based project from any and all disease conditions. We pride ourselves on being disease inclusive. And the technologies can be comprised of a variety of different approaches, including optical, electric, MEMS, other types of sensors, biosensors, microfluidic components, or even smartphone-based systems. There's a number of criteria that will be prioritized when selecting those letters of intent that will be invited for full applications. You do not need to meet all 7 of these areas, but the more that you do, the more chance you have of moving forward with the competition. So I won't read this all, but you can get a good idea for kind of what we're looking for in our sweet spot. Importantly, in this next slide, if you scan the QR code, it will take you directly to our website where I got all the information that I just shared you. So everything I just shared with you is at this acmepoct.org website. If you want to, after today, if you're really interested, you think we can help you, the deadline to submit those expression of interest or the letters of intent is a little over a month. If you are selected to move forward in the process, you'll be invited to submit full proposals that will be due at the end of April. And then meritorious projects that are ultimately selected will receive 12 months of in-kind support and expertise from our ACME POCT. So today, that brings us back to today's glue. We're here to tell you about the technological, clinical, regulatory, and market and business expertise and services that we can offer to you that you could build into your letter of intent. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Eric Vogel, who is the leader of our technology core, and he's going to tell you about a number of services and expertise that they provide. Dr. Vogel?
Thank you, Stacy. You can go ahead to the next slide. So our overarching goal is to provide consultation and assistance related to the fabrication, manufacturing, and characterization of whatever point-of-care microsystems technology that you are proposing. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the types of services and opportunities we have to work with you. This gives a list. We have engineers who can provide a comprehensive technology assessment. We have the ability to do microfluidic engineering design and manufacturing consulting, microfabrication, process flow development and support, materials characterization, imaging, and testing. a wide range of 3D printing and 3D bioprinting for biomedical research, mobile app development, and usability and accessibility testing. So our ideal customers for the technology core are those early stage developers, preferably that have some amount of pre-design lock, who have a prototype in hand, but have very specific needs regarding materials analysis, device design, or process flow. So the point of our service is to help you really solve the specific needs that you have, not necessarily to design a whole new prototype, but to help you solve specific needs that you have for your prototype. And there's a couple of ways that we can work with you. So we do have a team of engineers and scientists who can consult with you on specific microfabrication and characterization challenges. And then, as I'm going to describe in a moment, we have facilities here at Georgia Tech, and there's really two ways that you can use our facilities. So the first way is we can train your engineers and scientists to do the work in our facilities, or we can have our staff perform the microfabrication or characterization for a fee. And as part of our consultation services, we would discuss with you the best way to work with us should you decide to do some of the work inside of our facilities. So I'm now just going to give a brief overview of the types of facilities that we have. So first, Georgia Tech has the largest academic clean room and fabrication facility in the Southeast. The website, cleanroom.godtech.edu, will give a lot of the details for all of the tools that we have, but we have over 190 instruments and 17 staff associated with our clean room and fabrication facility. We serve over 500 individual users a year and almost 200 different principal investigators and external companies. So some of the tools that we have a bio clean room where you can do 2D or 3D printing, QCM, surface plasmon resonance, contact angle measurements, variable pressure, scanning electron microscopy. And then we have a whole list of tools that can be used for fabricating different types of sensors, microfluidics, and other devices. A wide range of diffusion tools for doing oxidation and annealing, etching tools, lithography. We have a maskless laser aligner that allows you to do lithography without needing a mask. We also have e-beam lithography that lets you get down to tens of nanometer in terms of the size of what you're patterning. A wide variety of material synthesis and thin film capability, atomic layer deposition, chemical vapor deposition, a wide variety of e-beam and thermal evaporation tools, sputtering tools, a whole host of metrology tools as you're doing your processing, microscopy, profluometry, spectroscopy. We have micro machining capabilities, so laser machining, inkjet, 3D printing, and then finally electronics packaging, so dicing, bonding, plating. The other major facility that we operate is the materials characterization facility for characterizing the structure and composition of materials of interest. Again, the website is here. It has all of the details, mcf.godtech.edu. We have 13 staff scientists, over 75 instruments. This facility also serves almost 1,000 individual users a year. And we really have the whole gamut of characterization capabilities. So scanning and transmission electron microscopy, focused ion beam, a wide range of X-ray tools, diffraction, fluorescence emission for looking at the structure of materials, proximal probe tools, so X-ray photoelectron spectroscopy, optical spectroscopy, solid probes, atomic force microscopy, scanning tunneling microscopy, mass spectroscopy, so we can do SIMS, we can do ICP mass spec, as well as for organic mass spec as well. And then finally, we have a mechanical property characterization facility that lets you look at things like stress, strain, creep, fatigue, fracture of your materials and devices. I'm going to briefly turn it over to Morgan, who's going to talk about some of the capabilities at Emory.
Thanks, Eric. So in addition to the facilities at Georgia Tech, we also have an Emory prototyping hub at Emory University in our new Health Science Research Building 2. And in particular, we have a 3D printing and 3D bioprinting facility. And this is really meant to help you with additive manufacturing for medical tissues and devices. For example, we have gel matrix, tissue matrix, and bone matrix. So you can create different types of either items for your device or also different material that you can test with your device. In addition, there's a micromachining facility where very tiny structures can be made, in particular for microfluidics and organ-on-chip-based systems. And then finally, there's also an extended reality innovation space. So we have a number of different headsets, as well as designers and developers who can help with designing, developing, prototyping, consulting related to VR, AR, and extended reality. Next. And then one thing that's actually more used actually is something called the App Hatchery, which is mobile app development service based at Emory. And we create mobile apps and digital health tools for all kinds of clinical research applications, including for diagnostics and companion diagnostics. So we have an end-to-end system where we have designers and developers and app store accounts and tools so that we can build mobile apps and digital health properties and products that can be attached to your devices. And that's it. Back to you, Eric.
Great. So with that sort of as a background of the infrastructure, I just wanted to give two quick examples of the use of the Georgia Tech facilities by external companies and specifically biomedical related companies. Almost 15% of the usage of our facilities is by external entities and companies. Oxos Medical Incorporated has been using our facilities for several years now. They have been developing one of the world's first handheld dynamic digital radiographic X-ray instrument, and they have been not only developing a lot of the processes for making scintillators associated with the X-ray technology, but have been using our materials characterization facility to characterize the structure and properties of their scintillators. And that's what you can see is a scanning electron microscopy image on the bottom left of their scintillator. So they use our facility to characterize a lot of the R&D that they're doing. The second company, as an example, is Anson Biotech. They focus on making a next-gen biosensor platform primarily for cell-based bioprocesses. And specifically, they have microfluidics that they have developed that allows samples to come from a cell-based bioprocess and then go into their characterization capability. And so they've used our clean room for doing a lot of the wafer-based processing from substrate preparation to the lithography and etching. So a lot of the R&D associated with developing the device. And then they use our materials characterization facility for doing things like defect inspection, device failure analysis, and materials characterization. So those are just two examples. We have a wide range of other companies that we work with, and we look forward to helping you with your project. And I think with that, we're going to turn it over to Greg Martin, who's going to talk about our clinical core capabilities. Greg?
Thanks, Eric. And hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining today. So I'm going to take you on a bit of a whirlwind tour talking about our clinical core as a complement to what Eric just described for all the technical and other resources we have on the engineering side. So let's go to the next slide, and I'll sort of walk through a little bit of the things that we do. Our overarching goal as the clinical core is to provide the consultation and assistance to you as team developers, device developers, to do clinical verification and validation. I'll talk more about what that means. And then obviously also then adding usability and regulatory strategy as two key areas that we can help with. And I'll hand those off to the next people after this, but let me talk a little bit more about the clinical core. So particularly what the clinical core has to offer you as inventors or developers is first starting with things like clinical use case ascertainment. So we have a variety of subject matter experts and key opinion leaders across our system. We have a variety of health systems, including both adult and pediatric medicine and specialties that are integrated together, where we can really bring those groups together and think about what are the ideal use cases for new developments, new technologies, how does it align with the clinical needs as well, and finding out the way that your device or your technology that you're working towards may be really used in a clinical environment. We can also do clinical usability assessments with a variety of different end users, and that I will hand off next after I'm done, so we'll get to that next. And then regulatory strategy, which is a key element for almost everyone in this space, we'll hand off after we talk about usability. So that'll be another piece that we'll talk about that falls under the umbrella for our center. But the other things that the clinical core particularly can do is everything from laboratory test verification either in a laboratory setting or in a more clinical setting. We do that with either clinical or contrived samples, and we can do that in a variety of ways, including doing prospective or retrospective biobanking. We have a variety of biobanks that are available as services at our institutions, and we can use those, or we can collect those prospectively to really develop the tools that people need to either do laboratory or clinical verification work with their devices or the things that they're developed. We can also do clinical program development. So for people, protocol development for people who are moving along in sort of the readiness level, and they're thinking next about aligning the regulatory strategy and the technical development with the next phase in their development. And what does that look like for maybe a definitive clinical study or other clinical work that needs to be done? And our regulatory experts can help outline that, and we can help design the protocol and the tools that go along with that. And then the other part that we can do is clinical test validation, and some of that might fall into a more pilot study, but we also have the entire breadth of our network, and we can do some of those things because of our ability to do those either for a fee or at least offer the services to get those things aligned and find ways that you may be able to use our system as a resource or connect you with others who can serve your needs. So the ideal customers for us is really all stages. I talked a little bit about some of these early stage. And so certainly early and mid-stage developers, we can do everything from thinking about what the right use case is and thinking about either bridging from the technical and the engineering assessments into the clinical side and the regulatory strategy that aligns with that. And the later stage developers who may be interested particularly in hands-on usability, either at a point of care environment or with trained laboratory operators, or even doing validation testing and thinking about protocol development and what a clinical study might look like for them to get through the regulatory hurdles for them. So finally, the last couple things I'll talk about. So ways that you can interact with us. We certainly do with all of our teams a deep dive assessment into the clinical use case and think about how our key opinion leaders and subject matter experts can provide guidance and expertise to you, not just in clinical use case, but really in clinical use specifically, where the rubber hits the road and how your device or your technology might be applied in a clinical setting, not only in the variety of those, but really thinking about how it's going to work when it may be on the market and when it can be used in a variety of different hands. And I mentioned that we can do usability and regulatory tools, and we'll talk about those next. And then finally, the support and preparation for those other late stage clinical trials, which we're happy to support the initiation of, or at least get the process underway for people to think about what that looks like for them as their next steps. Thinking about what that looks like for us, so what you see on the left hand of the slide is a lot of the more laboratory-based verification, whether it's with bank samples that we have, contrived samples that we create, or other clinical samples that we collect. We have our laboratory teams, which can do a lot of laboratory-based verification, testing sensitivity, specificity, and other performance characteristics for a lot of the assays and other work that we do. That's just based on sort of laboratory tests, but as you see, we also do everything from app-based work and other microfluidics technical work. So depending on the kind of work you're doing, our clinical team tries to find ways to support that on the laboratory verification side. And then more through the center and the right side, you see that we do everything from young kids to children through adults, and in a variety of different environments, whether it's a drive-through or a mobile environment, at a community fair, in a hospital or healthcare setting where we can work with patients and other individuals in the community to try and do clinical studies or do use case assessments with individuals and or usability assessments as well. So with that, let me hand it off to Sarah Farmer, who's going to talk more about our human factors and usability team.
Thanks, Greg. Hi, everyone. I'm going to cover some of the human factors services that we offer through ACME POCT. So just to start with, I want to tell you kind of our goal with these human factors services. So our goal is to help companies in ACME optimize and de-risk product designs. We want to help them assess the viability of potential use cases and for potential end users, and provide teams with actionable recommendations for improvement. So we can help you design technologies in a way that's going to hopefully eliminate design-induced errors and minimize human error, and allow users to easily recover from errors that do occur. So these are just some of the specific usability evaluations that we offer. So I'm not going to go into what each of these are, and we certainly offer others as well. But when we decide what type of method to employ for evaluation, we consider factors such as overall project timelines and any deadlines the project team may have, the target use case and the end user, what stage of development the technology is in, and the novelty of the form factor and the protocol. So as an example, if we're evaluating a technology in the proof of concept phase, we'll look for high-level barriers to usability in the planned protocol and in the prototype if there is one. But if we're doing a more in-depth usability and accessibility evaluation, we're going to look into the details and measure things like the force required to manipulate components. We're going to assess contrast ratios and text size and things like that. But for all of these types of evaluations, we offer actionable feedback and recommendations for improvement so that the project teams can actually take these recommendations and create a better product. We also offer all manner of user research, which I know is one thing that a lot of the teams get excited about. So we can design and deploy surveys, we can conduct focus groups, and we also run user studies in the intended environment of use. So we have found that intended use environment is typically not in a human factors lab. So we don't often run our user studies in a lab. For over-the-counter technologies, we have a database of participants who have agreed to participate in research in their homes. So this can be a one-time session, or it can include having participants use a technology over a period of time, like weeks or months, to kind of look at long-term use and adoption. We also work very closely with the larger clinical team, as Greg mentioned, for point of care healthcare settings. So we're able to work with patients in clinics and hospitals. We're able to observe and interview healthcare workers of all kinds, and we observe and interview clinical laboratory personnel when that's the appropriate end user. And as far as ideal customers, we love working with developers in all stages, and we can offer assistance in any stage. So for technologies that are in earlier stages of development, we provide actionable feedback that can actually be incorporated into the design to improve the design. So we're going to focus on eliminating design-induced error and help you anticipate human error for designs that minimize user error. For technologies in mid stages, we'll help you identify major barriers to usability that need to be addressed and help you refine the product design for ease of use. This could include user research at this point, so things like focus groups, surveys. And then for our later stage technologies, we're going to place emphasis on details that can be rapidly modified or incorporated. We know sometimes you're nearing design lock or you're on a deadline. So we'll look at things like on-device labeling, how the device handles, packaging, and instructional materials of all kinds. And this would also be when we would start getting into user studies. But again, we're happy to help companies at any stage of development, and we're typically able to tailor an evaluation despite whatever the circumstances might be.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I think that I just want to say on a side note, it's been fascinating watching you work because you basically make all the magic happen that we as consumers get on the back end, but a lot of work goes into that, and really appreciate having you part of the ACME family. I imagine that maybe people have questions for you or other people who have presented previously or the ones that are coming next. So I encourage everyone to go ahead and drop any questions in the Q&A, and we've saved plenty of time at the end for the Q&A. So I'm going to go ahead and pass the baton to Kathy Cambria. Kathy and the rest of the ACME POCT regulatory team have collectively more than 70 full authorizations and EUAs of diagnostic technologies under their belts. So I can assure you they are well qualified to be able to speak into this and providing our expertise and services in this area. So Kathy, take it away. Oh, Kathy, you need to unmute.
Sorry, I have a new puppy, so I'm trying to make sure that I stay quiet the entire time, but not during my presentation. So apologize. So for regulatory services, our goal is to assist the companies in not only identifying, but also the execution of the U.S. regulatory pathways that are available to them. Focusing on the regulatory requirements, also a quality management system, which they must comply with, and quality assurance. So the regulatory consultants, the team has over 60 years of combined experience with FDA submitting regulatory submissions, including PMAs, 510Ks, EUAs, IDEs, and things along those nature, ensuring compliance and preparing quality management systems. We also assist in communication between the companies and the FDA. And a little fun fact is that in the last 4 years, the team has worked closely with the FDA in both the RADx and the ITAP programs, creating test protocols and strategies used for the emergency use authorization. So this is basically a list of our regulatory strategies. And the first is a kickoff meeting, basically for regulatory assessment. And we're going to be discussing with the companies about their product and where they are in the process. After that, we would follow it up with a regulatory strategy. The regulatory strategy takes into consideration intended use development, classification of the device, the comparator and predicate, which may be used in their submission, a risk analysis strategy, and also identification of any testing requirements, the claims that the company will be made and will be provided in their labeling. We'll also assist in reviewing and assembling and facilitating communication with the FDA, preparing pre-sub strategy meetings, and also addressing risk analysis. A key aspect of regulatory is identifying what the risks are and how to mitigate them. Also planning analytical and clinical studies to support the risk assessment. We also provide, protocol, not only helping to draft it, but also to review it and discuss with the company what they need to have in place for those clinical analytical studies. Upon, execution of those protocols, we'll also look at data review and summarization for the regulatory submission, and ultimately assist in writing and aiding in the submission of either 510K, EUA, or de novo PMA, whatever the classification of the device may be. We would also assist in planning a manufacturing strategy, help review design control and quality management systems, and assist in draft and review of the quality documentation and processes used throughout not only the manufacture of the product, but also the quality management system. The ideal company, all stages are definitely welcome. Early review or consideration of the regulatory aspect is a key focus. So the first part that we consider is to have a kickoff meeting to discuss where the company is in the process, a regulatory strategy, and then also identification of any required studies for companies that are pre-design lock, meaning they haven't formally finalized what the finished product is going to look like. Ideally, the design should mitigate the risks from the risk analysis and show FDA that you have designed with the intended user in mind. And that's what the FDA waterfall to the right, identifying design controls, is using. The user needs is the top thing that somebody should be looking at, and then the design control falls down the waterfall. So in later stages, depending on where you are, we can help with FDA communication, protocol drafting, data review, and drafting the regulatory submission.
I imagine that beginning with the end in mind is really important, though, and early stage is more than welcome because it's easier to craft things with the end in mind earlier than later. Is that true, Kathy?
Yes, absolutely. It's always hard to make changes at the end. So the waterfall allows you to do continuous review at different points in time during the process, such that, again, you don't get to the end and then look back and be like, gee, either the user needs have changed or the user needs were not met.
So if somebody applies for our award and gets it, will you be available to, as long as they go through these different phases within the year, will you be available to help them at all stages?
Yes, absolutely. And I think the next slide sort of gives us an indication of those interactions. The plan is to start off with a kickoff meeting, and it will basically be scheduled and attended by your project facilitator. And then we sort of have a standard set of questions that we would like to understand, not only your product, but where you are in the regulatory process. And we would do this via teleconference meetings. Depending on where you are in the stage of the process, regular meetings may be identified as a requirement, and then we would meet on a regular basis to communicate the advancements that have been made and to help draft and review any of the protocols, processes that are needed throughout the process. So there's also some specialty meetings that we think would also enhance, the program and the projects themselves. One of them being a risk analysis. FDA is definitely a risk generated. They're always looking at what the risk is. So we would plan on having a risk analysis meeting where it would be an iterative part of every design. And throughout the development process, because you're in the regulated industry, and we would be, helping you learn how to conduct a risk analysis, do real-time examples with your product, and review iterations throughout the life cycle of your development. So some of the other specialty meetings that we were talking about, which are basically stage agnostic, but more informative for being in a regulated industry, would be an in-depth, review of regulatory equality as it pertains to your specific product and project. And, examples of that would be design control meetings and even quality review meetings associated with a quality management system. And this is just basically taking you through what we think the regulatory workflow would be. So we would start off basically with an introductory kickoff meeting. That's then followed by a regulatory strategy for the new POC test that you are looking to develop. Teach the team how to do a risk analysis. At the end of that, the team's action item would be to complete a risk analysis, which then again would be another meeting with the regulatory group to review the risk analysis, focus on any design controls, and assess the team has designed the product accordingly to its use case. And for point of care, of course, we're talking about that FDA is looking for simple to use by untrained users in a busy point of care environment. So we would make sure that the design control and the risk analysis met those user needs. In addition, the team would incorporate any design changes to make sure the design is simple and robust, again, meeting the user needs. Plan some flex studies, analytical studies, usability and clinical studies, which have all been discussed before. And this is all based on the risk analysis and the classification of your medical device. Again, assisting the team in reviewing the test protocols and developing acceptance criteria associated with tolerances. And once the testing is complete, assist in summarizing the results and compiling a regulatory submission. So our little example is that the regulatory team has reviewed analytical and clinical protocols along with their raw data and their data summaries, which have been submitted to the FDA for EUA submissions. And through that process, we have interactions and communications with not only the company, but with FDA on labeling before the company receives its EUA.
Wow, that's really tremendous. I mean, it's so complex and so important, and you and the team really bring so much expertise to this and transparency, quite frankly. So thank you for that, Kathy. Again, if anyone has questions for Kathy or the other presenters, please go ahead and enter them into Q&A, and we will promise we'll get to them. We are going to round out today with Mara Purcell, who is going to tell us about the market and business services available through the ACME POCT. Take it away, Mara.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Stacy. We have a number of different market and business services available within the center. One of the things that we like to do is take a look at the business plans for our awardees, to just review them to see where they are. What we found, and this is an example to the right of one of our analyses of a business plan, sometimes there are overestimations in these business plans that don't really correlate with what's happening in the marketplace. And it helps sort of realign our awardees with what's available and what's possible within the marketplace as far as, you know, the market size, and particularly who the end customers are of their particular products or inventions. It just helps sort of refocus, you know, where the efforts are. This is also true when we're helping our awardees with actually looking at different use cases as well, because there potentially is a different use case for their technology that has greater market potential that they haven't thought of. And so that's why starting off with a business plan is a really important direction for us to take. In addition, we take a look at what the competitive landscape is. Sometimes we'll help out looking at different, like I said, different use cases and what the competitive landscape is with those versus what they came in with. And then also other different pivots as well. Through our clinical services and through a lot of the meetings that we schedule with our key opinion leaders in the clinical group, we're able to sometimes identify like studies that would be helpful in order to collect data that would make these different technologies more appealing to funders in the future. So there are a lot of different directions that taking a look at the business plan and looking at the strategy that the companies are going after can help shift and improve the chances of them becoming more successful in the future. We also help support the grant writing with the SBR and SDTR. This is like looking at from a business perspective, like how to set up the company to make sure that you have the right structure in order to make the application more appealing. And then we have access to local and national funding resources, just the relationships that we have within the organization to help support future funding for the organization, for the partners that we have in our with our awardees. So that's just a quick summary of the market and business.
Great. Thank you so much, Maren, and the whole team. This has been a tour de force in what the ACME POCT offers and is available. And I think that Julie Sullivan kindly put in chat the link to the RFA. So much of what we presented in the beginning of this webinar was just an overview of that. And so, Julie, since you put something in the chat, I'm going to go ahead and ask you a question, if that's okay. So what if people really liked what they heard in today's webinar, think that the ACME could be of use to them and their invention, but they have more questions that weren't answered in today and they didn't think of it in the next, let's see, 20 minutes that they could ask in the chat? What should they do?
Well, Stacy, I'm so glad you asked. They are more than welcome to reach out to me if you click on that link that has information about FA. My contact is there. In addition, you can get all sorts of details about the deadline. The expressions of interest are due by March 31st, 11:59 p.m., not at midnight on April 1st. So do not delay. Please get those applications going. But if you have questions and would like a little bit more information about this process, feel free to reach out. We're happy to engage and provide you with some insights.
Great. Thank you so much. What other questions do we have from our webinar audience?
I've got one softball question for you, Stacy, which is lots of different services there. Do all of these exist already? Like when are these services ready?
Yeah, you want to take that one, Greg and Eric?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be happy to start, and it's maybe worth going back to that slide that you showed earlier, Stacy, that's sort of the priority areas that we can work on. So Eric mentioned it, and I think I touched on it a little bit, that a lot of what we focus on is trying to align the things that we have to offer with what really is going to help these teams the most, meaning that in many ways that's a priority for us, but it also means we want to use our in-kind services because that's probably going to help you the most. So all the lists of things that we talked about are all possible. Some of the things, particularly beyond the scope of sort of the simple stuff, and Eric gave a good example of that, but from the clinical side, we can't do large scale clinical trials within the context of a year or the funds that we have available, either in kind or otherwise. But we certainly can set people up to try and do that kind of work. So when we have teams come to us, we certainly look at what the priorities are for them, and then particularly those that are meritorious and come into our system, we spend the first bit of time working with them to better understand exactly what their needs are and make sure they're connected to the right resources and how do we deploy those as effectively as possible. And Maren takes the lead on a lot of that to make that work. I think all the things that we've talked about are largely in place, but depending on sort of the exact nuance or the exact level of depth or detail that people need, then we may want to sort of look at how we're going to do that for each individual team or invention.
Yeah, and I think on the technology side, these facilities have been around for a long time, and they're available immediately. I think similarly, if there's a very specific process, for example, that you would want to do, we'd have to talk with you as part of our consultation and figure out whether we've ran that specific process previously, but all the tools are currently available. And because we have so many users of these facilities, almost everything that you can imagine has been done in one way or another, at least at a high level. So I think, we're definitely ready to go for trying to solve your problems.
Yeah, I think that, we have a saying, you've seen one invention, you've seen one invention. And I think you've seen so many and shepherded through so many different projects through. You have just a plethora of different services and expertise. And I know that, Sarah and Maren and Kathy also just have tremendous amount of experience under their belt that could be really, really useful along those lines. Question. Thank you, Roya. How many proposals will be funded?
I can take that one. Hi, Roya. Nice to see you on here. We usually try to select 3 to 5 projects in a given year. Obviously, it really depends on the meritoriousness of the projects and how they align with what our center can do and what our center can offer. But typically, we select between 3 to 5 projects in a given year. This is a 1-year engagement, if you will, that we plan on. Obviously, since this is through the National Institutes of Health, we're not always as fast at starting up as we would like, but we do work to have that be a full 12-month engagement period with any of the projects that are selected. Anyone else want to add to that?
I think that covers it, Julie. Well said.
Well, we've got
Oh, no,
two other
there's another question
questions
there. Yeah.
in the chat here, but I'm going to skip to the second one because it's related, which is how many projects do you receive usually? How many applicants?
It varies. I think 2 or 3 years ago. I think we had 60 or 70 applicants through the expressions of interest, and then we narrowed that down to a few, I believe about 10 or 15, and then to the selected applicants. Obviously, that was in the COVID heyday, I believe, with a lot of interest. I think that was that year. It's all a blur. So it just depends on how many people are interested.
I think we lost her. Depends on how many people are interested. But
Yeah, and I think that's exactly right, because it's the process starts off with the expression of interest or the letter of intent, and we often will get anywhere between 50 and 100 of those, but we try and narrow those down to those that we think are really going to be best aligned with the opportunity, and also then finding those that are likely to be meritorious, so that we can have them focus on really creating the deeper application that allows us to look at it. And Julie and others are right. We usually have about 3 of them funded, but we'll probably have 10 to 15 that we'll bring in and see the full application to try and decide which ones are really going to be best aligned and most suited to the work that we have to offer.
well, I've got a tricky one. I'm not sure who to direct it to, which is if companies have an international target market outside the US, can they still apply? For example, the regulatory services might not be applicable because they're not going for FDA clearance, but the other services might still be highly beneficial. Would we consider that?
Yeah, so I think the answer, yes. I mean, certainly we're still happy to work with them, and I would certainly encourage you to apply or at least submit your expression of interest. Part of that may depend on whether your team and your work is outside the US, or is it just your target market that's outside the US? For instance, you may be in the US, but you're focused on global health work or areas in lower resource settings that might be your area of focus, and that may not invoke the FDA, but it's still, I think our regulatory team may be able to provide you some guidance and assistance about what that looks like in other areas around the world, and let them chime in about that if that's helpful. But being outside the US or a target market outside the US does not necessarily exclude you from us working with you. And particularly for the in-kind services, it is one consideration, particularly for those applying, to make sure that you're able to take advantage of what we have to offer based predominantly here in Atlanta.
Cool. Short answer, still apply.
You just distilled my answer down to 2 words, Morgan.
Yours was more nuanced. I think John has a question about if we have a RADx funded project and we have a need for assistance in microfluidic design, what is the best place to start the conversation? And I suspect the best place is to submit a letter of intent, but I want to hear others answer that as well.
Yeah, so certainly I think through ACME, the letter of intent is how you would start to get those services. I'll point out, though, these facilities, as I mentioned, they are open to external users, and so we have 15 to 20% of the usage of our facilities on a fee basis that's available for external folks. So obviously the letter of intent's the place to start, but even beyond that, if you want to use our facilities, you can look at the clean room or the materials characterization facility website, and there's some links there to start the process of using our facilities.
If I could add to John, if you're currently in RADx, why don't you reach out to me directly, just so that we're in alignment and we can chat a bit.
Okay, it looks like we do not have any open questions. So I'll say going once, going twice. Okay, I'm going to, before I officially close, I just want to thank my wonderful co-panelists and the leadership of ACME POCT, and all of you for joining us today on this call. I want to remind you that today is being recorded, and we will post this on our website. So if there's anything we covered today and you want to revisit, or if you want to share this recording with any of your friends and co-inventors that you think might benefit from this, we would love to have you circulate this. And with that, I'll say farewell and thank you all for joining us.
Thanks, Stacy.